Now that Alex has a good idea of the layout and structure of his dashboard, he's ready to start preparing the data and performing any necessary calculations. So let's come across and have a look at our data. This data will be imported every 6 months. The first step would generally be to go about cleaning the data, but we're lucky in that this data is already very clean and doesn't require further attention. While it is usually good practice to put calculations on a separate sheet, sometimes it may be more pragmatic to put a few helper functions in with the data. And that's what we're going to start with doing first. We're going to be doing a lot of calculations with the dates, particularly trying to get metrics for different months. And to make this a little easier, we're going to make sure that we've got a little function that returns just the month. So we're just going to quickly type in the heading month, and then using the month function, I'm going to click on call date, and that will return the month of the call. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the year, except this time I'm going to use the year function. Those are both complete, so I'm just going to use my fill handle to copy down. Because I'm going to be working with a lot of these columns on a regular basis, to make my calculations a lot easier and quicker to create, I'm going to use named ranges. So I'm going to press Ctrl A and then Ctrl Shift F3, and I do want to use the top row, so OK. What I've done now is name each of these columns, and you'll see this makes the calculations much simpler. And finally, to ensure that the data range will automatically adjust and my calculations still pick up any additional values, I'm going to put this in a table. So this is just Ctrl T and then OK. Now I don't want such bold formatting, so I'm going to simplify that. And then very importantly, I'm going to come up to the table name and I'm going to give it a more user-friendly name, and I'm going to call it TBL calls. So now my raw data is prepared, I want to start doing some calculations, and I'm going to do these in a new sheet called Calcs. Many dashboards, and certainly in the case of call centers, will need some benchmarks or target data to compare the results to. So the first thing Alex has done is entered the target values established by the business. For example, they're looking to get a resolution rate of 65%. If the business themselves are going to enter the targets, we would probably put this on a separate sheet. But as it's Alex who's putting them in, we're not going to worry to do that. Now coming down to our summary data, these are some of the main things we need to calculate before we can even get started. And the first one we're looking at is the start date. Because this dashboard will be reused in 6 months' time with completely different data, we're going to need to calculate this. And this is very simple. We're just going to use our min function, and it's our call date, and we've named the column, so nice and easy. We also want to get our total calls, and this is just going to be the number of rows in our newly created table calls. Now our average monthly calls is a little trickier because we're going to need to get the average of the number of calls per month. Now when you're confronted with a more complex calculation like this, it might be easier to break it down into a few simple calculations, and that's exactly what we're going to do. When we get into our monthly section, we're going to need a breakdown of the metrics by month anyway. So we're going to start those calculations here, and then we're going to use our monthly call calculations to get our average monthly calls. So first thing we're going to need is our start date. So I'm going to click in A33, type equals, and click on our start date. And then click enter. We're then going to use our eDate function. So I'm going to type equals eDate, and we're going to add 1 month to our start date. And then we can copy that down for the following few months till we've got 6 months worth of data. And there are 6 months good to go. It may be handy to have a month name for when we come to do our charts. So for this, we're going to use our text function, click on our date, and we want that in the month format. So I'm just going to put 4 M's in there. and then tab. We're also going to need our actual month number, which we will use to compare with the data in the table. So I'm just going to click on that month and tab, and then we're also going to need a year. Just make sure you choose the function, not the named range. And finally, we need to calculate our monthly calls for that month. Now, because we're only getting 6 months worth of data, we won't get any duplicates in the month number, so we don't actually have to worry to check the year as well. So we're just going to do an equals, and we're doing a count ifs, and the criteria range we're checking is our month column. And this time I do want the named range, and I'm checking to see if it's equal to the month. So for July, you can see those were our total calls. Now I'm just going to copy those all down. And we've started to generate the metrics that we're going to need to show our monthly breakdown. Now we can also complete our average monthly calls. So we're just going to come back up here, type in equals average, and select our monthly calls. So we've started putting some calculations in place so we can generate the values we need. The next thing is to look at how we can actually get those values to populate our graphical elements on our dashboard. So coming back to our dashboard, we're just going to expose some of these cells temporarily. So I'm going to select those columns and choose No Fill. Now, even though this is going to be hidden data, for maintenance purposes, it is really important that you still label your cells. So this first one is going to be calls per month. And the next one's going to be our average answer speed. Now, I don't actually want to put the calculations in here. I just want to pull the values through so they're easily accessible to the dashboard. So I'm going to type in equals, come back to my calcs, and click average monthly calls. You'll notice that I have the calculation for my ASA directly under that, so I can just drag that down, and then I don't actually want any decimal places, so I'm just going to remove those. So I now have the values in the sheet, but how do I get them into the actual graphics themselves? Obviously, I could just have a cell and put it in, but again, that limits our scope in terms of moving things around. So instead, I'm going to click on my shape, come up to my formula bar, type equals, and click on the cell that contains the value I want. I can't put a calculation in here, but I can put a cell reference. And when I click enter, it has now pulled that value directly into my shape. And all I need to do now is add a little bit of formatting. So I'm going to make this size 24, and it's quite important with your sizes. Think about them, and once you've selected, be consistent. And that is how you can pull your data into your dashboard using graphical elements. So now our data's prepared, the next step is to start constructing our dashboard in earnest. And that's what we'll look at in the next video.